Hey, welcome back. This is book number 8 in the series of the boys versus the girls, and this one's called The Girls Take Over. Chapter 1. This one has a lot more chapters in it, so I'm probably going to read maybe 1 or 2 chapters in each video instead of just one, so it won't be so many videos. Chapter 1, Dreaming. It was the month Eddie Malloy had been waiting for, tryouts for the Buckman Elementary baseball team. Only 6th graders allowed. For Caroline, however, April looked as though it might be the most boring month since they had moved to Buckman. She didn't care much for sports, but she knew how desperately her older sister wanted to get on the team. What Caroline most wanted was for something exciting to happen to her, something so dramatic it would get her picture in the paper. But Eddie was fuming about the rain. "Look at it," she wailed, staring out at the dismal West Virginia sky. The sun, which took its sweet time rising above the hills each morning, hadn't shone for a week. "I'll bet we won't have tryouts today after all." Eddie, Caroline, and Beth were finishing their toast, getting ready to return to school after spring vacation. "You've got a whole month, Eddie. The games don't begin till May," Beth told her. Beth was in the 5th grade, and Caroline, being precocious, was in the 4th, having been moved up a year. "Relax," Beth said. "I can't," said Eddie. "This is my one chance to show Jake Hadford that he's not the only good player around." Mrs. Malloy came into the kitchen in her robe. "Gracious, I overslept," she said. "It's a good thing you girls got yourselves up. This rain just makes me want to stay in bed. It's a good day for dreaming." Mr. Malloy followed next and went directly to the coffee maker. He was singing his usual song. The words began, "I hate to get up in the morning," and the girls rolled their eyes at each other. He was coaching Buckman College's football team this year in a teacher exchange program. Whether or not he would move his family back to Ohio in September was still very much up in the air. "Better wear your yellow slickers," Mrs. Malloy told the girls. "It's supposed to rain all day." Eddie groaned and looked out the window and down the hill toward the river. The Buckman River, ordinarily shallow, was swollen now by all the rain. It entered town on one side of Island Avenue, where the family was staying, looped around under the road bridge to the business district, and went back out of Buckman again on the other side. "Well," Eddie said finally, "if I never become a professional baseball player, I guess I'll be a scientist. That's my second choice." "Good thinking," said her father. "Keep your bases covered," he grinned. Beth had her nose stuck in a book, as usual, while she ate, her hand blindly reaching out to feel around the table for her orange juice. She never once took her eyes off the page. If she'd only read decent stuff, her mother had once complained, because the stories Beth liked best were about human centipedes and creatures under the sea. Beth was currently reading a book called The Village of the Vampire Ants. She didn't give much thought to what she wanted to be when she was grown. No one ever asked Caroline what she wanted to be when she grew up, because she talked about it constantly. The world's greatest actress. That's what she could see her name in lights on Broadway. Caroline Lenore Malloy, starring in play after play after play. As the Malloy girls crossed the swinging bridge that took them to College Avenue, they saw the Hatford boys waiting for them on the other side. Despite all the boys' tricks and teasing since the girls had come to Buckman, the Malloy sisters had started walking to school with them when a strange animal, which the newspaper called the abaguchi, because no one knew what it was, had been sighted in the area. It had later been found to be a cougar, and the Hatford and Malloy parents had insisted their 7 children walk together to and from school for protection. Now that the cougar had been caught and taken down to the Smoky Mountains, the kids, out of habit, still walked together every day. The boys weren't exactly waiting patiently for the girls. What they were really doing was standing on the swinging bridge at their end, and as soon as the girls stepped on it, the boys began jumping up and down so that the bridge wiggled and swayed and bounced. "Ha ha, we're so scared," Eddie said dryly. "Look how high the water is," Peter called. Peter was in 2nd grade, the youngest of the boys. Wally was next in 4th grade with Caroline, and the twins, Josh and Jake, were in the 6th grade with Eddie. Beth was the only girl who wasn't in a class with a Hatford. "Lucky you," Eddie had told her once. "What's the highest the river's ever gotten?" Beth asked when the girls reached the other end. "It was up over the road in front of our house once," said Wally. "Did you ever have to be rescued in rowboats or anything?" asked Caroline. She could just see herself, waving a white handkerchief from a window, the water rising to her waist, then her chest, then her throat. How she would faint just as the rescuers reached her and would have to be carried out to the boat. No, Wally said, it was never that high. Both Eddie and Jake were glum as they headed to school because Jake, too, wanted to try out for the baseball team, and they certainly couldn't do it in the rain. The rest of the crew was in good spirits, though, however. You know what we ought to do, said Josh? We each ought to put our name and phone number in a bottle and float them down the river. We could ask the people who find them to call and tell us where they were found, and whoever's bottle travels farthest by the end of the month wins. Wins what? Said Wally, who loved fooling around and liked the idea. Well, whoever wins could be king or queen for the day. Queen of what? Asked Caroline. King or queen of the rest of us. The rest of us would have to be his slaves for a day and do whatever he wanted. Oh, no, you don't, said Eddie. If one of you guys wins, you'll make us do all kinds of gross things. Okay, they have to be things within reason, said Josh, and the bottles should all be the same size. Maybe Mom could get some for us. That sounds fun, said Beth. We'd better do it while the water's flowing fast, though. The bottles will go farther then, said Wally. They might even get to the ocean, Peter cried excitedly. And then one of them could be picked up by a ship at sea, Caroline said dreamily. I could be sitting in a chair at breakfast, calmly eating my cereal, and get a ship-to-shore message from a handsome captain of an ocean liner saying he was coming to West Virginia to meet the maiden who had put her name in a bottle. The others laughed. Or maybe he'd call to say that as soon as he read the name Caroline Malloy, he threw the bottle back in the ocean and washed his hands with soap and water. It was hard to concentrate on schoolwork when there were notes to be sealed in bottles, Caroline thought. Her desk was right behind Wally Hatford's, and when she had nothing better to do, she would trace letters or words on Wally's back with the end of her ruler and dot the I's with her pencil. Or she would blow on the back of his neck and whisper romantic words just to see his ears turn red. But this morning, she was content to stare out the window as rain trickled down the pane and imagined a lonely aspirin bottle adrift at sea with a tiny piece of paper rolled up inside it. She imagined the handsome sea captain in his blue and white uniform bending over the side of the boat to scoop it up and, Caroline? The voice of her teacher suddenly intruded, and she blinked back and snapped to attention. The answer, please, said Mrs. Applebaum. The Ohio River? What? The Gulf of Mexico? Caroline bleated. Caroline, we happen to be doing long division, and I assure you that if you divided 4,668 by 12, you would not get the Gulf of Mexico, not even the Ohio River. Chapter 2, A Horrible Thought. Wally took off his jacket soaked through with rain and hung it on a hook by the back door. He and his brothers kicked off their wet sneakers and left them in a heap against the wall. All the way home from school that day, Wally had been thinking about the bottle race that they were going to have on the Buckman River. At last, his brothers were going to do something that interested him for a change. Not dump dead birds and squirrels on the girls' side of the river, not howl outside the Malloys' windows at night, trying to frighten them into going back to Ohio so the Bensons would return. The Benson brothers were the best friends the Hatfords had ever had, and it had been a sad day when Coach Benson moved his family to Georgia for a year and Coach Malloy moved his family to Buckman, into the Bensons' house no less. Putting notes in bottles to see how far they would travel on the river was just the kind of thing Wally Hatford loved to do, however. But he couldn't help suspecting that Caroline would try to do something crazy and turn the race into a theatrical performance starring who else? Caroline Malloy. In some ways, Wally was a loner. He could entertain himself for an hour just blowing fog on a window pane and tracing designs in it. He could spend half an afternoon in summer lying on the porch on his stomach with his face over the side, watching ants trying to carry a breadcrumb to their anthill. He seemed to live a life half in and half outside his head and didn't always need people around to make him happy. The boys had barely started across the kitchen when the phone rang. Wally, who was closest, picked it up. Even before the person on the line said a word, Wally said, "We're all here, Mom, and nobody's been murdered or anything." Their mom always phoned the house as soon as she thought they'd be home from school to be sure everyone was accounted for. She worked in a hardware store, and Mr. Hatford was a mail carrier, so the boys were on their own for a while each day after school. "There's a little potato salad and some Swiss cheese in the fridge, but don't touch the chicken, that's our dinner." "Okay, if you have any homework, now's the good time to do it with all this rain." "Okay," Wally said. Then he told her about the bottle race, and Mrs. Hatford promised to bring home 7 white plastic bottles with tight-fitting lids. Jake got out the potato salad, and Josh found the cheese. Peter had discovered a half-eaten box of animal crackers in his closet and was sitting at the table, swinging his legs and humming a song while he chewed. "We should all throw our bottles into the water at the exact same time to make the race fair," said Josh, stuffing some cheese into his mouth. Jake, however, grinned as he set a box of crackers on the table. "Who says the race has to be fair? Who says we couldn't put messages in a whole bunch of bottles and send them out on the other side of Island Avenue a day or two sooner to give them a head start?" "That would be cheating," said Wally. For once, Josh agreed with him. "I don't want to do that, Jake. I'd really like to see whose bottle goes the farthest when they all begin at the same place at the same time." Jake folded a slice of cheese over a cracker and opened a can of pop. Each boy was allowed only one can of pop a day. "Well, if my bottle goes farthest, I'm going to make everyone do my homework." "If I'm king for a day, everyone will have to do all my chores around the house," said Josh. Wally thought about what he most would like the others to do. "If my bottle goes the farthest, you each have to give me your can of pop for the day," he said. "If my bottle wins, everybody has to bake a big batch of cookies, all for me," crowed Peter, beaming at the thought. The boys chewed a while longer, smiling as each imagined himself king for a day. And then Wally had a thought, a terrible, awful thought. Maybe it wouldn't be a king at all. Maybe it would be a queen. He looked around the table. What if one of the girls' bottles goes the farthest? What if it's Caroline's? The smiles disappeared from the boys' faces. If Eddie was queen, she might make them do something dangerous, like crawl high up in a tree and get a squirrel's nest. If Beth was queen, she'd probably order them to make her lunch. But if Caroline Lenore Malloy was queen, she would dress the boys in ruffled shirts and knee breeches and make them carry her down Main Street on a throne. "We can't let that happen," said Jake. "It would be murder." The phone rang again, and this time Jake answered. "Hello?" Wally watched as a slow grin spread across his brother's face. Sure, okay." When he hung up, he said, "The girls are on their way over. Eddie wants to make some rules for the contest." "Okay by me," said Josh, but Jake's eyes narrowed. "How do we know the girls aren't planning to cheat? How do we know they aren't going to put their bottles in the river ahead of ours? Eddie's up to something, you can bet." Wally slumped down in his chair. The cracker he had been chewing stuck to the roof of his mouth. The war between the Hatfords and the Malloys would go on forever and ever. He was sure of it. Until either his family or theirs left Buckman. Chapter 3 is called Deal.